I'm excited to be here today to have this conversation on Valentine's Day. Exciting, right? This is the 52nd edition of Solution Illuminator series. We're going to be talking about overcoming addiction to love, sex, and drugs. This is very timely conversation because we have a very charged atmosphere in terms of the mood today. It's Valentine's Day. And we also have Lisa Joe here. Lisa Joe Va is the author of The Pit of Despair, How God, Prayer, and 12 Steps Saved My Life from Addiction. Lisa Joe is a John Maxwell Leadership Certified Speaker, Trainer, and Coach, which I'm also a part of. She's a keynote speaker and the founder of Health to Happiness Coaching. She's also a professional artist, a peer specialist at the Community Health Center in Colorado. Lisa Joe loves swimming laps, international travel, and hanging out at cafes to write and mingle with other patrons. Please welcome my guest, Lisa Joe.
Thank you very much, Tulu.
Yeah,
Happy.
thank you for being here.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Thank you. All right, so let's get into how I want to start. And we actually be getting this excerpt from your book. And just yesterday, I was watching a Nollywood movie. The movie was about how a wife was addicted, and the husband actually had to be able to adjust to the situation, and eventually they had to go their separate ways because she couldn't get over it. But then the good thing is that we have someone like you who was able to go through all this and is on the other side and also helping other people to do the same. And that's why we want to learn from your experience, your knowledge, and that's why you wrote this book. So most of the
Yes.
discussion we're going to be having is from your book. So in the book, and if you're here and you want to be part of this conversation, please let us know. Let us know where you're joining us from. Put your name in the chat, where you're joining us from. If you have questions for our guest on this happy Valentine's Day, please put in the chat so we can engage and learn from each other. This is something I'm also learning about, and we want to have a conversation on it today. So from the book, you said addiction is a global pandemic, a behavior or consumption that is used over and over again by a person to numb out or escape discomfort, even when the consequences are harmful and all consuming. That's a very powerful definition. And going through your story was a story from love to sex and drugs, right? So, like, I think a good place to start from is how does love become addiction? Because love is a good thing. Today is a Valentine's Day, right? Everybody's celebrating love and going out with their loved ones, and people tend to lower their guard a little bit on Valentine's Day, and to a good extent, also to a bad extent. Some people might even actually experience something good. Some people might experience something bad. But it's a famous thing. It's a popular thing for people to lower their guard on a Valentine's Day, to go out with somebody they've probably been saying no to, receive gifts from somebody. So that's a good thing, right? So on the other side of it, how does love become an addiction?
Well, Tulu, what I would like to reframe as love is putting quotation marks around it. Love addiction. It's not really about love. It's about obsession. It's an obsessive compulsive behavior, very impulsive. You meet a person, you're just like when it's normal to feel butterflies in your stomach when you meet someone you're attracted to and excited and kind of like ungrounded, just like very intrigued. But with quote unquote love addiction, that doesn't stop there. You become completely obsessed where you can't stop thinking about the person. Um, and I mean, the worst case scenario would be when you hear about other women or men stalking their loved one. They're
Yeah.
not really in love. They're desperate to fill up some empty part inside of them that really should be filled with God and love for themselves and positive things, but instead it becomes a real trap and a real destructive addiction.
Wow. So, I mean, it's a very good place you went there in terms of, well, a space that needs to be filled by God. And at a very layman language to describe that is loneliness. And the
Hmm.
thing about loneliness is that everyone experience that. You don't have to be an addict to experience loneliness, right? And it seems that it goes up and down, right? Sometimes you're lonely, you find a way to. And what I really want to understand is that for an addict and for everyone else, how does the loneliness differs between the two groups? Is because everyone experiences it, right?
Absolutely. Everybody experiences loneliness in their life. I think it's part of the human condition. As far as being an addict goes, loneliness becomes isolation, becomes this idea that I can do this on my own. I need to take care of this addiction on my own. I don't need any help. I need to prove to the world that I can do this. And then we push people away. And in my case, since I'm a recovered sex addict, I would have this illusion of being connected with another person when it was just fake. It was an illusion. It was like smoke and mirrors. So, real connection and connecting to the community is very important in recovery. Very important.
Wow, wow. Real connection and connecting to the community is very important in recovery. But then community starts from the family, all right? And you were able to narrate some experiences growing up with your father. Growing up, you said your father was Jewish. Uh, he didn't really believe in God, and he prevented your mom from going to church and taking you guys to church and things like that. With that experience, how did that shape the way you see the world and your tendency to move in that direction that you moved?
Mhm. Growing up without God,
Mhm.
I was very, very lost. Um, my father isolated us from the rest of the world because he didn't want this secret of domestic violence to come out, is what I believe. I can't speak for my father, but just the patterns of I work at a community mental health center, as you mentioned, as a peer specialist. I work with clients with severe mental health, high suicidality, and substance abuse issues. And the clients that I have worked with that have been in domestic violence situations and the research that I've done, it's all about isolating your family from the rest of the world. And that is very lonely, that is very isolating, that is very toxic. And um, yeah, my father was very abusive, he was very violent. My mother was basically a battered housewife. And my childhood was very chaotic. My father loved me. He was just a very mentally sick person. Um, I had the opportunity to become friends with him 7 years before he died. I gave my amend to him. I realized I had been blaming him for everything wrong in my life as an adult and that I wanted to stop. So I took responsibility for my life, and that was the day we became friends. It was a miracle, absolute miracle.
Wow, miracle. We all love miracle. We all love miracle. And another aspect of that is the fact that you started experiencing things at 13 years old, and there are certain things that your dad said about you that were not so nice, and you were scared about that, and you eventually uh, experienced some of those things.
Mhm.
If you, is there any power? Do you think there's something about confession that plays into that, as to why those things were confessed and you actually experienced some of those things down the line?
I'm not sure what you mean by confession. Confessing
So,
those to other people, or
so yeah. So, he was saying certain things, right? He was saying, well, he was using words like, oh, you've been promiscuous and things like that, and when you were struggling, you eventually did some things, right? So, if you want to look back, does that words that he used on you, what effect did he have on those action that you took?
yes, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy because
Mhm.
I believed him. I believed
Yeah,
my father. He was my first teacher. I loved my dad. Even though he was violent, I believed every word that he said. And I remember a couple incidences where um, the the words that he gave me became a doorway to how my life went. When I was 13 years old, my father accused me of having sex. He called me very derogatory names that are connected to that. And when I turned 14 and I had the opportunity to have sex, I said, well, my father already thinks I am, so why don't I just do it? And then
yeah,
when I turned 16, before I did any drugs, my father had told me, you're on drugs, you're having sex, these accusations, very mean. When drugs came my way, I said, um, F it, for lack of better way. I'm going to
mhm.
do them because my father thinks I'm already on drugs anyway. When
Wow.
I was an adult, um, at the age of 37, when I actually was in the crux of sex and cocaine addiction, I I just kept pushing it higher and higher. How far can I go? And I actually tried to become a sex worker one night and didn't get the money up front, which the man walked off with the money, which
Mhm.
was a real blessing because God did not want me taking that path. But when I did that, I said, this was my destiny. My God, sorry, this was my destiny. My father already told me that this was what I was. So I believe it's very, very important to be loving and kind to your children and to focus on the positive and to not accuse them of doing things that you don't know for sure. Because later on down the road, they might, that might be a self fulfilling prophecy because they believe what you say.
Yeah, yeah. That was the point I was trying to make, because
Yeah.
sometimes when we hear something over and over again playing on our mind, we tend to believe it and act that way. So that's what I was trying to get at. If you're here, please let us know where you're joining us from. Put your name in the comment section, and if you have a question, please let us know so we can pass it across to our guest today, Lisa Joe. So, I mean, now that we were able to figure out the part of your interaction and relationship with your dad, if you want to look back, any other childhood experience that also moved you in that direction besides the interaction you
Yes.
had with your dad? Yeah.
Absolutely. Every single sex addict I've ever met, from being in the 12 step rooms to talking to them and becoming friends with them, every single sex addict I've ever met has been sexually assaulted as a child, including myself. By mine was by an uncle who's no longer with us, but I carried that with me too. I was sexualized at a very young age, and people either people have problems in that area in their life because it's such an act of betrayal, you know.
Yeah. So if you want to look back to that particular experience with your uncle when you were much younger, how could your parents prevented that? What do you wish that they did to prevent that kind of situation?
What I wish would have happened was that they didn't let my uncle babysit us,
Hmm.
but they had no
Yeah.
way of knowing that he
Yeah.
did that.
Wow.
But you know what? In my opinion, as painful as that experience was, it gave me testimony to help other men and women who have been through that, because I ended up forgiving my uncle on Christmas Day, 1 year before he passed away. And I told him, I forgive you for everything you've ever done. And there was a long pause. And then he said, thank you. And that burden was lifted off my shoulders. Just freedom.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very powerful. Another miracle.
Wow. Interesting.
And that was
Interesting.
the first year that I was a Christian. So on Jesus' birthday, I forgave my uncle for doing the unimaginable, the most
Yeah.
horrible thing that anyone has ever done to me. I forgave
Wow.
him.
Wow. I can imagine that part of it is just making sure that you're scared to talk to your parents about it and things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, he
That
threatened.
that's,
He threatened me as a little
yeah.
kid. Yeah,
Wow.
he
Interesting.
threatened
Thank
me
you for
not to tell my parents.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there
It's
was
a
a
lot
lot of
of
mental sickness in my family.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all pray about that to save us from things like that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. So, if you're here, please let us know that you're here. Put your name in the chat where you're joining us from. And if you have a question for our guest, Lisa Joe, about addiction, even if you're not going through an addiction, you might have somebody that is going through an addiction. If you have a question around that, uh, please don't hesitate to ask your question and put it in the comments.
Can I
So
mention
now,
something real quick?
please go ahead. Mhm.
Addiction comes in all forms, whether it's something intense and self. Uh, it's a matter of degree. What is killing you fastest? Well, drugs and sex addiction will kill you pretty quick because they're very dangerous and obviously very life threatening. But addiction comes in all forms, including workaholism, which is very common, scrolling social media, what they call doom scrolling,
Mhm.
video games, gambling. There's a whole wide range of addictions, and it is an epidemic, as you mentioned before. It is
Mhm.
an epidemic of gargantuan proportions.
Yeah.
Addiction just really impacts us, but there's a lot of stigma also, where addicts are considered bad people, dangerous people. Some of them are, but it's
Mhm.
a matter of us being sick trying to get well instead of being bad trying to get good.
Mhm.
Addiction really is, I believe, a sickness.
Wow. Addiction is a sickness. I mean, one of the interesting things that you said is you painted the situation with drug of use, the disease that happens. You also said that addiction is a lying game. It's like people, it's
Mm.
addicts are liars. They lie about the situation. So if you want to move into that a little bit, how and how can you explain the fact that lying in that kind of spiral situation even gets the situation worse than that than the way it is? Uh, why do you think lying is a big part of the problem there?
Mm. Because if we were told the truth, we would realize we had a big problem and that we need help.
Mhm. Yeah.
The lies of the addiction are, I don't have a problem. I can control this. I have power over it. I can manage this all by myself. All lies.
Mhm.
I'm not hurting anyone. I'm feeling empowered by this. I don't need to stop. I'm not hurting anyone. All those
Yeah.
are the lies of the addiction.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. One thing that we can quickly connect with that is the fact that addiction has to do with going for the higher high, for lack of words.
Yeah.
And what I mean, like you just said, it's not about drug alone, right? It's not about sex alone. It could be alcohol. People do consume alcohol, right? If somebody drinks a bottle of whatever it's called today, and they discover, wow, in order for them to feel the same way they felt today, tomorrow, they might have to drink 2 bottles, right?
Mhm.
In that kind of situation. So, is that the same way it works with love, sex, and drugs that we're talking about today, or it's different?
Absolutely the same because we
Yeah.
become tolerant of
Yeah.
the amount that we're taking in, whether whatever it is, a behavior, a substance. Uh, and in order to get that same effect over time, we have to take more of it in or make it more intense. But I believe that this is a 12-step approach, that
Hmm.
addiction is progressive. It never
Hmm.
gets better.
Wow.
Even if you
Wow.
stop, if you ever pick back up, it starts off where it left off and it gets worse fast.
Wow. Wow.
That's been my experience with some relapse that I had. It's been
Yeah.
16 years away.
Hmm. I mean, so now thinking about it, the fact that you say, well, normally it gets worse, and it started as a process of trying to solve a problem, but then it happens that the problem doesn't get solved anyways, it, because you were saying, oh, at some point it helps you to shift your mind away from the mental situation that you are experiencing, but then addiction didn't solve the problem, just make the problem worse, basically. That's
Yes,
what it is.
absolutely.
Wow. So, I mean, now we can go to the specifics of it because your book was very interesting. I have a range of emotions reading the book, from happiness to sadness, then in between, um, uncomfortable, and also excitement. It was funny, direct, it's a lot of things in between. So
Thank you.
it's it's good to read and experience all those kind of emotion while you're reading without the person experiencing in your presence. I think that's one of the magic of reading. And if anybody was so specifically in the story, you talked about your relationship with Thomas, Derek, Gary, and eventually you just mentioned it now. You married in 2000 for the wrong reason, right? So now, when you're by yourself and you think about all this decision that you made, what major thing would you think? Okay, I think I could have done this differently. I saw this red flag, I ignored it, and things like that. What are the
Mm,
major things that comes to your mind when you reflect on those
sure.
interactions?
So, first of all those names that you mentioned are made
Yeah.
up. They're real
Okay, that's
people,
good.
but I changed the names to protect the
That's good.
people in my life.
That's good.
So, boy, I think I lost my train of thought. Um, what what I would advise people to do is to not start having sex with someone until you really know them, because it blinds you. It blindsides you, and then for love addicts, you think, "Oh my gosh, I'm in love." Sex and love are two different things. But a lot of people, when they dive into bed with someone, they can't see the difference.
Hmm.
So I wish I would have waited, but I didn't have that perception I was
Yeah.
blinded by this idea that if I get intimate with someone physically, that equals love. That's an addiction to attention, to
Hmm.
quote unquote love.
Yeah.
Gives me the illusion that I'm accepted and approved of.
Hmm.
Those are addictions, real
Wow.
addictions for someone who didn't get unconditional love as a child.
Hmm. Wow. So, I mean, one thing that jumped at me is the fact that it's don't have sex with somebody until you really know them. And if you want to think about the dating, relationship, marriage kind of situation that people try to move to in the real world,
Mhm.
so what would you recommend for relationships, dating, relationships? Is it the conventional way of meeting people, dating apps, reality talk
Mm,
show, and things like that? So, based on your experience and what you just said, what would you recommend if somebody's asking your niece is asking you for advice? What would you say?
I would tell my nephew to stay off dating sites and to
Mm,
get involved in the community, common interest groups, let things organically happen instead of trying to force things. Let God rearrange and arrange the situation and let him unfold it instead of you trying to, you know, build a profile and put yourself out there in that way. I mean, it's different for each person, but for me, I can't do that because I use those dating sites for sex. And my experience has been even if I reach out for friendship, most of the people on there, I would say probably 90%, they're liars. They all want sex and they will manipulate and lie to get it. People posting pictures of themselves. And you meet them in person, they don't even look like themselves. They don't even look
wow.
like the picture. I mean, just
Yeah.
blatant, lies and manipulation just to get that one thing. It's
Yeah.
a real facade. It's fake.
Wow. It's fake. Wow. So I mean, that's
And
that's
it's
that's really
different
good.
for each person. I know
Mhm,
people who have gotten married
mhm.
by meeting their spouse online. It's
Yeah.
not for me, and I don't recommend it. That's
That's
just my
good.
humble opinion. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's very powerful. That's the conventional way of meeting people, be part of something, and that's why you gave in. You said in one of those chef programs that you talked about, it's good to know people, serve people through love. So if people join the community and in doing that, of course, they're gonna find somebody that actually believe in what they believe in, and eventually they can see if things can work between them.
Yeah.
So if you're here, please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from, your question, your comment, just so that we can actually pass it across to the guest that we have today. All right, at this time, there's one particular incident that you narrated in your book, the demotion at work, and the exchange between your boss during that kind of experience. How how did that happen, and what lesson would you like to share from it?
Which interaction are you referring to exactly?
So when you were at work and you said you got demoted, you almost lost your job.
Mm,
Yeah.
yes, that was very humiliating. I worked for the airlines as an international service director in reservations for 14 years, and I missed a lot of work. I was very depressed. I had panic attacks. I was suicidally depressed when I lived in Chicago. My psychiatrist didn't know how to medicate me properly, so he just kept adding to instead of taking away. So I was on like 13 different psych meds at one point, and I wasn't getting any better. I was getting worse. I have dealt with severe mental health in my life. I have bipolar 1 and complex PTSD. And by the grace of God, I have learned how to manage to the point of me being able to help other people with their own journey. Um, and um, the situation with the demotion was that I missed a lot of work, uh, to the point where it was my boss against me. I love my boss, and she was like, "I'm so sorry that I'm in this position." And I had a hearing with the union of the airlines
Mhm.
versus my boss, who was against me.
Mhm.
And I got this demotion, and I absolutely loved what I did. It was a leadership position. People who asked for a manager, I want to speak to your supervisor. Well, I was the one that took that call. It was a lot of thinking outside the box and coming up with win-win situations for the company and for the passenger. I loved it. I thrived in it. And I had to go back to regular sales. And did that stop me? This was a consequence of my
Mhm.
behavior, my sex addiction. I was missing a ton of work. I was calling in sick and doing crazy, dangerous things.
Mhm.
And the consequence of that demotion did not stop me from what I was doing. I couldn't even make the connection. I lied to myself that
Mhm.
I was the victim. What I was doing was creating that situation. I was an active player in that situation. I was the reason I got demoted,
Wow.
but I didn't
Wow.
see it at the time. I saw myself as a victim. Just
Yeah.
another lie of the addiction, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The lies of the addiction. Thank you for sharing that. So another specific situation from the book, Jennifer loved being all cooked up. Her shy personality vanished, giving way to talkative, giddy socialite. I can relate to that. I see that when people with certain personality go into a social environment, be they have to take some substances to be able to feel social and be able to socialize very well. Uh, my question is, what would you recommend as an alternative to that in case we want to prevent a situation whereby somebody become addicted to that? Because there are people that say, well, they can't even be intimate with their partner without taking drugs or alcohol,
Yeah.
and that doesn't stop there. Like we know, it just goes all the way down to the bottom. So if you want to prevent that, what would you recommend as the alternative?
Love yourself. Learn how to
Hmm.
love yourself. Take good care of yourself. Self care is not optional in this life. Take it seriously. Make movement or exercise a non negotiable. Get involved with your community. Uh, be engaged in your environment. Go out with your coworkers after work. You don't have to drink. Order a Coke or a Pellegrino. Pellegrino. I spent time in Italy, so I know the accent well. Anyway, I digress. You don't have to get on. You don't have to make alcohol your social lubricant. Just practice being social. And if you don't have the skills, there's plenty of videos out there on YouTube. There's wonderful books on learning how to socialize. Go that route instead of substance because you're playing with fire.
Hmm.
Whether you are an alcoholic now, if you keep playing with that, you could become one. You may be
Wow.
predispositioned, especially if you have that in your family.
Wow. Wow. So it tends to run in the family if it's there already.
Yes, mine ran
Hmm.
in my family. I have several people in my family are addicts or were addicts.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So another part of the book, you say, well, you acted like a teenager, rebellious, going against suggestions, even by your sponsor. And actually, before we get into that sponsor conversation, because we can't really talk about sponsorship without the 12-step program that you talked about in your book,
Mm-hmm.
the 12-step program. What is that 12-step program that you talked about?
The 12-step program originated with Alcoholics Anonymous. A
Hmm.
man named Bill W. wrote a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. It is a design for living. It has made me a better person. It's not the solution for everyone, but it
Hmm.
saved my life. Literally, it saved my life. And it's a way to really, bottom line is to get in touch with your higher power, to rely on, in my case, Jesus, Holy Spirit, Father, Father God. That is my higher power, but it can be different for each person, and that's
Hmm.
okay. But to not be self reliant, to be God
Hmm.
reliant.
Hmm.
And there are steps involved where you do an inventory on
Hmm.
yourself, you identify everyone and everything you resent, because resentments are very toxic for everyone, but especially for addicts. We don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
And um, so you start identifying what you who you resent and what your part in it was. No, if it happened before you were 18, you didn't have a part in it. You were just a kiddo. As an adult, if you are 18 or older and you have this resentment, and you may want to examine your actions and see what part you played, even if you have to dig deep and pray about it and explore it through writing.
Hmm.
A 12-step program is just a rich way of living, and it's such an enormously beautiful community of people. Some of my best friends I met in those 12-step rooms.
Wow. Wow. And that's why you said I was not alone anymore. I had found my people. I kept whispering to myself, how did this happen?
Mm,
So that makes a lot of sense that you were able to do that. So a major part of that is having a sponsor in the program, right, as you narrated. So based on the things that you were struggling with the situation, the fact that you're still human, and the other person also had history. Also, how were you able to keep the relationship with your sponsor, professional, and yet vulnerable, because you have to see certain things and lower your guard and let them know what you're struggling with.
mhm.
How does that work? How does that kind of relationship work?
I believe that the sponsor sponsee relationship is a trinity, as one of my sponsors explained. It's you, your sponsor, and God. Now, sponsorship is not so much a professional relationship, it's very personal because you are very vulnerable. There are boundaries, just like
Hmm.
any healthy relationship.
Yeah.
Um, Women generally sponsor women,
Yeah.
is what I've broke that rule, and I don't recommend it
Yeah.
because of fake love addiction or whatever. Um,
Hmm.
but women sponsor women and men sponsor men is the tradition.
Hmm.
And it's like having a mentor, an amazing mentor. We
Yeah.
all have mentors in our life who help guide us, and that's exactly what it's like.
Hmm. Yeah, mentors. I mean, I understand how that feels, to having somebody that is not so in a formal environment, but in a way that you can really get to know the person and can get to know you. If you're here, please put your name in the chat. And if you have question, which, yes, Lisa Joe, please put it in the chat. You want to say something?
Yes, I was going to say that um, sponsorship is like what you look for And a sponsor is someone who has what you want. If they shared something at a meeting, if they were vulnerable about part of their share, or it spoke to you, or it hit you right in the heart, you might want to ask that person to be your sponsor. They may say no, but so what? Take the
Hmm.
risk. Just
Yeah.
like mentorship. If I meet someone who has what I want, I'll ask them out for coffee. Can I buy you a cup of coffee and hear what you do? Most people will share. And then if it leads to an official mentorship, that's great.
Mhm.
If they say no, that's okay. What's the worst thing that could happen? As my father used to say, they could say no.
Mhm.
So what?
Yeah.
The answer is no if you never ask, too. A definite
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. And we've lived life enough to know that no is not the worst thing that can happen to human beings. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I love that.
Yeah. There are
Totally, that's
worse
great.
things that there are worse things than just no. No is nothing compared to other things. All right. So I mean, during this process, you went through it and started making efforts. The first time you craved so intensely to go back and you did not return to the addiction, what made that possible? How were you able to break that returning event? And oh, I'm returning, but then you're like, oh yeah, I'm not going to return. How were you able to do that?
Are you referring to relapsing?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, yes. Relapsing for me has been a disconnection with the program, with the community that it provides, with the support, and also disconnecting from God and trying to this they call it self will run riot,
Mm-hmm.
where you take control, you kick God out of the driver's seat and you get back in and try and do things your way.
Hmm.
And that doesn't work, and that can lead to disaster for an addict.
Wow. God should be in control and you should be on the passenger seat. And you also said something about God in the book. God is both graceful and has a sense of humor. Why do you say so?
Well, I think God's grace comes through his sense of humor because he has a divine plan that we don't always see, and we want things on our watch instead of his.
Yeah.
And he is the most creative,
Mhm.
funny
Yeah.
God. My relationship with God
Yeah.
is he makes things happen when I least expect it.
Mhm.
The serendipity of situations and meeting people at the right time, or being at the right place at the right time. Sometimes it's funny,
Yeah.
and the way timing, just the miraculous, uh, grand scheme, not scheme, but plan that God has for us. He can make funny things happen, and it's one of the greatest things in my life is the best medicine is what they say is laughter. To be
Yeah.
able to laugh at yourself, to be jovial. They say, joy is coming in the morning. There's a reason for that, because I believe that God wants us to be joyful, even
Good.
with hard things happening all around us and going
Mhm.
through trials and tribulations. And
Mhm.
even those 12-step rooms are so funny. We all laugh at ourselves. We all
Mhm.
laugh at
Mhm.
others with them. It's a great time. They say
Yeah.
we're not a glum lot. We are not
Hmm.
a glum lot. Got
Wow.
a sense
Wow.
of humor.
Good. 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 I mean, a sense of humor it's very important these days.
Oh
That's a
yeah,
whole conversation by
especially
itself.
yeah, especially
It's,
with the seriousness of things happening in the world. Yeah,
yeah.
it'd be
Yeah.
really scary if you take everything seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a guy that could be a big problem. So in your book, you just mentioned God, but God is not the only thing that you mentioned. That in the book, there's a lot of prayers in the book, and this is the first book that I can remember that I read that has so much prayers in it. So I have to give that to you. That's very important
Thank you.
to mention that. So, but then for you to have put a lot of prayers in the book, that means that prayer is very important through the whole process. So if you want to quickly say something about how prayer helped you in the whole process, how did you use the power of prayer to recover and be able to be on the other side?
Prayer is what I've been taught is prayer is like talking to God, meditation is listening. In order to have any relationship with anybody, including God, you have to talk to them. God wants us to talk to Him. He wants to listen to us. He wants us to express our desires of the heart. He wants our praise. And to build faith through prayer has been an essential piece of my recovery. I do written prayers. As you read throughout my book, I wrote a bunch of prayers every day, almost every day, in my book, The Pit of Despair, How God, Prayer, and the 12 Steps Saved My Life from Addiction. And one night at 2 a.m., I walked to my file cabinet in the dark, turned on the light, and God told me, deep down inside, this little voice told me, pick out your file of prayers and sit down and count them. I counted 83, and God said, see, your first book is written. I put together this book of just the prayers with introductions, wrote a nonfiction book proposal, sent it off to a New York publisher, and they accepted it. But they wanted a thicker book. It was 18,000 words, but they wanted it thicker so if it's in the bookshelf, you can read the title and the author. So I turned an 18,000 word document of prayers into a 60,000 word memoir with the prayers weaved throughout it. And I did that in 3.5 months. I was very focused. I was working with a mentor who taught me to block off 3 hours time on my weekend and dedicate that time to the non-negotiable of sitting down and doing some writing on your book. So it gives you time it was perfect because it takes me time to settle in. It gave me time to settle in, to relax. And I got in the practice of making a cup of coffee or tea, doing my ritual, writing. I would write at a cafe, the big window. I would go down to Capitol Hill in Denver and do some writing there. And it becomes a pattern, a habit. The more you do it at the same place, at the same time every week or every day, you can instill some very positive habits into your life that way.
Wow.
And that's my book. And I worked
That's
a
very
full-time
powerful.
job. Yeah.
Yeah. Consistency, a time of the day, particular time. Thank you for sharing that. Then you just get accustomed to that. It's easier for you to think because when you're there, you zone out and just like, okay, this is what I'm focusing on.
Yes, it builds momentum. It builds momentum in a positive direction. Good. If you start and stop and start again, it's harder for that ball to go up the hill and then it goes down and then I push it up. If you keep pushing it up the hill or down the hill, it's going to build momentum in a positive direction. If you do it with intention, with clarity, knowing what your goal is, and pursuing that goal and strategizing it to figure out how can I accomplish this? What needs to be my non-negotiables in order for this to be accomplished? Get a mentor also because they can really inspire you or a coach, a life coach. Life coaches I've been coached by 5 different executive coaches in my life. They have been monumental in my change process. So I highly recommend you look at getting a coach.
Wow, that's very powerful. Coach, very important. I was still listening. Is it Tony Robbins that was saying something about that today? Yeah. Coaching is very important. So now let's get a little bit into the specifics of the 12-step program. There's a couple of things you mentioned that Walk me through the process of making a list of people to make amends with, reaching out to them, and their response. With any
Mm,
experience you want to share on that?
yeah. So there's a connection between step 4, and I just want to state I'm not an expert on any 12-step program. This is just
Mm-hmm,
my experience and what I've learned in the since
mm-hmm,
2007 was when I started working 12-step program for my addictions. Um, so there's a step that I mentioned before. Step 4 is making a searching and fearless moral inventory of yourself, where you list
yeah,
your resentments,
mm-hmm,
who you're resentful toward, what happened, how it
mm-hmm,
affects you, and what your part in it is. And then you take that list, you do a few more steps, and you
mm-hmm,
reach step 9, which is made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So
mm,
what you do is you really search and in your heart and do some through writing, figure out what your part in it was. And
mm,
then you arrange a meeting with someone that you owe an amend to.
yeah,
You reach out to them, you arrange a meeting, and
mm-hmm,
you give your amends of what you take accountability. It's almost like confessing your sin. You
yeah,
take accountability for what you've done, and then you not only do that. That can be just an apology, but you say what you're
yeah,
going to replace it with. Like with my father, I
mm-hmm,
told him, I'm going to respect you from now on.
yeah,
I told him, I've been blaming you for everything wrong in my life for as long as I can remember, and I'm not
mm,
going to do that anymore. And I'm going to respect you. I'm going to
yeah,
honor you, and I'm going to listen to you because I didn't listen to
mm,
him either. I was stuck in a teenager mindset. I was
yeah,
rebellious. I was. Um, they say that when you start your addiction, that's where you emotionally are stuck until you grow up and get into recovery. So I was very
yeah,
much. My inner teenager was driving in the driver's seat without a driver's license.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Sorry
yeah,
about that.
yeah, no problem. Wow, thank you. I guess somebody was trying to ask you how the meeting is going.
Yeah, I got a phone call from a friend.
No problem. That's fine. So I mean,
Actually,
in
you know what it
just
was? I
mhm,
set an alarm every day
yeah,
for 8:55 local time
hmm,
to pray for courage and discernment. It's a reminder.
wow, that's really good. I mean, that's another nugget for the day. We didn't plan it, but it happens. Thank you
Yeah,
for sharing.
yeah.
So, if you're here, please put in the chat that you're here. If you have questions for our guest today around addiction, Mr. Joe, please don't hesitate. Don't be shy. I know this is something that people try to stay away from, but it's something that we have to learn about also. So, just to support what you said resentments are like poison and expecting the other person to die. Poison
Yeah,
yourself, but expecting the other person to die. That's very powerful. That's stuck
it
with me
is.
when I had to read it a couple of times just to make sure that I got that clearly. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So he said, well, a lot of resentment. I think we got that already. So the biggest takeaway from the sessions was admitting to the self-centeredness with which I've operated my life. What what does that entails, and how do you connect that to addiction?
I'm sorry. What? Can you repeat that for me? I apologize.
So you said the biggest takeaway from the sessions was admitting to the self-centeredness
Hmm.
with which I operated my entire life.
Yes,
How would
because I'm
go ahead?
sorry. Now I understand. I
Mm,
apologize.
uh-huh,
Everything used to be all about me, me, me. Everything.
mhm,
Like there was selfishness and self centeredness, which are characteristics of an addict. the whole world revolved around me. I used to take things very personally. If someone didn't call me in the time frame I wanted them to, I would get angry at them. I would start making stories in my head that they don't like me anymore. I'm rejected, when life gets lifey. It
Mhm.
may not have anything to do with what I'm telling myself, but when
Mhm.
you shift from it's all about me
Mhm.
to a more open place where
Mhm.
you honor and respect the people around you, you realize people's actions are not about you. It's about
Yeah.
them. And that's okay. And I accept and I love people. I love them unconditionally. I accept where they're at. I respect them. And that is very different from what it used to be when I was all concerned about me, me, me. One thing that also helped me get out of the me, 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 self
Mhm.
centeredness is
Mhm.
volunteer work,
Yeah.
volunteering my time. I volunteered for the Botanic Gardens here in Denver, the American Red Cross. I was on a board of directors as a volunteer. Um, Volunteer work is a great way to give back to the community. And you meet people. And a bonus, you feel like
Mhm.
you're a part of something larger than just you.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Getting out of yourself and see that the world is not about you. There are
Yes,
billions of
yes.
people in the world, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So one of the things that I've actually observed when I've been able to move around America and also growing up in Nigeria is the fact that homelessness is not something that is imaginary. People actually experience this.
Mhm.
And when I moved from one state to another state in America and I observed homelessness in different group of people, and when I ask the people residing in that place, usually they say, "Well, it's addiction."
Mm,
That's what leads to that, and that's the only explanation that I give to me. I don't have time. I'm like, yeah, I need more. I'm like, how
mm,
connect it with me?
mm.
So that's why I'm asking you, based on your own experience, what kind of possible connection? I know that was not your
Yes,
experience. I mean, I'm
sure.
happy about that, but that it seems that that's some people's experience, right?
Connected.
But
Yeah.
how is that possible
Mm,
to be that common in a lot of places, different places?
sure, sure. So I work with the homeless population, some
Yeah.
of them here in Denver at my day job with the mental
Hmm.
health center. And some of them are addicts, some of them are not. But drugs will sure help you to lose everything that you've ever cherished or owned quicker than anything else. And a lot of folks end up on the streets. They lose everything. They lose their marriage. They lose their home. They lose their possessions. They lose love. And I almost experienced that. I was living in a hotel on the
Hmm.
verge of going homeless when I ended up in living in a place called Caris Community. It was for people who experience persistent mental health conditions. And the day I moved in was the day I became clean, and I've been clean for 16 years. And that place works miracles on people. I served on their board 5 years later, gave back.
Wow.
So,
Hmm.
yeah, to answer your question, there is a connection. I live in Denver, and we have a lot of meth, amphetamines, and that drug in particular, well, that is one of the drugs, not in
Yeah.
particular. That is
Yeah.
one of the drugs that drives people to the streets very quickly. Their life
Hmm.
becomes a pit of despair. It's like
Yeah.
me, if I were to consider doing cocaine again, it would be the equivalent of me flushing the toilet, my life going down the drain with it. I have I have worked so hard for the beautiful life that I have and my connection with God included that if I were to ever touch drugs again, I know it would be just be a matter of quickly it would go downhill.
Wow. Wow.
And I don't want
Thank
that.
you. You know what? I mean, nobody wants that. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
something that's very, something that's very close to that does happen, and people don't like to talk about unless it happens, is suicide,
Yeah.
mental health, and suicide, and things like that. People don't like to talk about it. People stay away from these things because
Yeah.
nobody wants to like be associated with this kind of thing. But it happens, and when people do something to themselves, that's when people want to talk about it. So suicide, for example,
Mhm.
is what is there any knowledge around that is different from how it leads to homelessness for
Yes.
suicide?
People think that people who do drugs or are addicts are just
Hmm.
out there partying and having a good time.
Yeah.
It's the most loneliness. It's like living hell. But you're
Hmm.
putting on you're believing the lies that this is helping me or this is building me up or making, but it's covering up so much pain that
Hmm.
pain can erupt into destroying yourself. Is
Yeah.
very,
Hmm.
very sad. And
Hmm.
there are some people in the 12-step program, not everybody makes it. I have
Yeah.
known people who have completed suicide
Hmm.
because they went back to the drug of choice.
Wow.
And whether that's sex addiction, drug addiction, workaholism, some
Hmm.
people who have workaholic issues, they have heart
Hmm.
attacks.
Right.
They have health problems as a result of
Hmm.
not taking good care of themselves. The
Wow.
consequences of addiction are so dangerous. They want us dead.
Hmm. Wow.
Addictions want us dead. Period.
Hmm.
Whether it's killing us quick
Addictions.
or slowly. Yeah.
So I like the way you say as if addiction is a person. It's like you're
It's like a
humanizing.
personality. Yeah.
It's a, it's just like, oh, who's that? Who's that? Who's named that?
Who's Mr. Addiction?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's very powerful. Thank you for joining K Quest on LinkedIn, on Instagram rather. All right. If you have a question for our guest, K Quest 101, please put it in the chat and I can pass it across to our guest. So still having this great conversation. I'm learning a lot. I mean, the good thing is that you experience all that and you're on the other side now. You just said that you were on a board helping people and things like that. So now I want to talk about the fact that you're now a sponsor for other people who are experiencing this. What part of this do you really enjoy the most about being a sponsor?
I really enjoy when I see the light bulbs go off in someone's brain
Mhm.
and the progress that people make in
Mhm.
living and embracing a healthy, positive lifestyle and the transformation when things felt hopeless. I sign every copy of my book the same way, and that is where there is hope, or I'm sorry, where there is life, there is hope. And I have seen it millions of times inside those 12 step rooms. That's just happens to be the path that God took me on to get clean. Uh, People, it's like you walk around like the living dead, and God brings life back into your world. It's like a resurrection
Yeah.
and a
Hmm.
cleansing. It's so dramatically different than when you're in it. And I don't take anything for granted as a recovered addict. I
Yeah.
am grateful for everything I have. Today, I have a safe home.
Hmm.
Today, I am a keynote speaker. I am involved. I have a coaching practice called Hell to Happiness. I help people in my day job and out of my day job because I've got a lot of side hustles. I'm an aspiring filmmaker. I love to travel. I love to meet people. I'm an extrovert. If you haven't figured that out, I'm an ENFJ, Myers Briggs. um,
Yeah, thank you. Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. That's really good. That's really good. You impacting the society a lot. You've had coming on podcasts and talking about your experience and making us learn from it. The good thing about experience is that you don't have to experience certain things. You can learn from people that are experiencing it.
yes.
I think sometimes
Oh,
people say experience is the best teacher, but
yes, it
I
sure is.
mean, but you don't. It doesn't have to be your experience,
No,
though.
and my
That's
book, the book that I
yeah,
wrote it for people inside of addiction or
yeah,
loved ones who want to understand it better. As
hmm
you mentioned, it's a pretty raw read. My story is pretty intense,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it has all emotion in it. It was hard to write. Parts of it, the part with the cocaine, it was so hard to write that I felt like I was crawling out of my skin. It was so
hmm
uncomfortable. But
yeah,
it was all worth it because if it helps one single person, it's all worth it. And my book
yeah,
has helped at least one person so far. It was published in 2024, in
hmm
June 11th, 2024.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's been a wild ride. It's been a beautiful ride.
hmm Wow. Oh, you said it was hard to write. That's why it's hard to read too. Very
Yeah,
emotional.
parts of it are hard to read. Yeah, but it's very vulnerable. It's very vulnerable.
Very vulnerable. Very
I wanted that. I mean, it ended up that way.
yeah,
But to speak through an addict who's in the disease of addiction, the language has to be raw
yeah,
because that's where they're at. It's meeting people where they're at. But if you're interested in learning what is it like to be an addict, buy my book, read it.
yeah, yeah.
I've written very inspiring prayers throughout my book too. Um, I'm a devout Christian. That's my higher power.
hmm
And if it weren't for God and the 12 steps, I wouldn't be alive. I would be dead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, let's quickly touch. We're wrapping up. We're coming to the end
Sure.
gradually. Yeah, there's a level of stigmatization that comes with this kind of experience, just similarly as mental health, right? And
Mhm.
addict is also like that. So any experience on stigmatization, and if anybody is experiencing that, how what do you want to say to the person to encourage them, or even discourage the person that is stigmatizing another person?
Yeah. I would say everybody's doing the best they can with what they have,
hmm
and that addiction is an illness.
hmm
It's not a character flaw, or it's not a moral issue. We're not doing this on purpose. Who
hmm
would want to destroy themselves on purpose?
yeah
Um, so stop judging
hmm
and take a look at your own life. Maybe someone you love has an addiction issue. Maybe you do. And
yeah
you're judging someone outside yourself because you're judging yourself first.
hmm. Wow. Thank you for saying that. I mean, it seems that the definition of addiction that we started from was very challenging to really assimilate, because
Hmm.
it seems that everyone is addicted to something on else, because we're not talking about only love, drugs, and sex, right?
Caffeine, right?
One of caffeine, right? People drink. People say, "Well, I can't do anything to work without drinking my coffee." It's, so it seems that addiction is more than those three things that we talked about today.
Hmm.
And one of the things that you talked about is addiction to food,
Mm.
right? Addiction to food. Is there any way to like draw a line between, oh, I'm just eating what I feel like eating, and now I'm addicted? Because a lot of
Sure.
people probably want to know that, right? If
Yeah.
somebody say, well, I don't have a problem with love, sex, or drug, but then they eat food. So How can
Sure.
somebody know whether they're addicted to food or not?
That's a very good question. When food, I mean, we all want food to taste good, right? I
Yeah.
mean, part of being a human. When there's all different forms of food addicts. There's the
Mhm.
extreme of compulsive overeating.
Yeah.
There are anorexics. It's basically like uh, eating disorders, right? Binging and purging, bulimics.
Hmm.
They're all food addicts. It's
Yeah.
uh, all preoccupation with food.
Yeah.
Me, as a recovering compulsive overeater,
Hmm.
I used to not be able to stop thinking about food. What is my next meal? What am I going to get? I'm craving this. I'm going to follow the craving. I need to get this. I need to get my sugar fix. I'm a sugar addict, which is not
Hmm.
fun because sugar tastes good, but I don't
Hmm.
I don't touch it. It takes me to places I don't want to go. So, and that addiction is a work in progress for me. It is the hardest addiction because we
Hmm.
all have to eat to live.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
it's always, when you're having a rough time or stressed out, my mind still goes to the place. Wow, I could really use whatever. They call it comfort food for a reason.
Hmm.
Um, Now, what I need to do now is make a phone call to a fellow in the program, connect with God, pray,
Hmm.
meditate, do some form of positive distraction like art or a swim or, a hot shower to just kind of get back into my body. Um, but it's been a huge problem ever since I was a little girl. It's the oldest addiction. I grew up in
Hmm.
violence. The only thing I had to reach for was the food. That's what soothed me. So
Hmm.
it's been very ingrained in me, that habit of reaching for food. By the
Hmm.
grace of God, by working a program called Overeaters Anonymous, God has released
Hmm.
55 pounds off my body so far, which and
Wow.
counting. So,
Hmm.
and I've got a ways to go. I'm still overweight. I'm
Hmm.
a work in progress, and that's another thing that I want your audience to know is we're all works in progress, and to be kind and loving to yourself and to give yourself the grace that God gives you. He knows we're
Wow.
all
Wow.
works in progress. We are until the day we die, you know?
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect,
Well,
including us.
yeah. I like the way you said, I'm a sugar addict, as if that's a profession. I'm like, is that a profession?
That's very
You,
common, right?
yeah, very common, actually, very common. I'm aware of that. So, Overeaters Anonymous meeting, that's a conference that takes place, or what? What
No,
what
it's
is
a
that?
12-step program, OA
Huh?
for short. Overeaters Anonymous. You can go
Oh,
to oa.org to find out
mhm,
more. And it's for people who have compulsive overeating,
mhm,
anorexia, or
mhm.
bulimia. And it's a
Wow.
wonderful 12-step program. Oh, it
Mhm,
saved my life. I was I was over I was like 336 pounds. That's a lot, and that's dangerous. That is not a healthy lifestyle. But I would
mhm.
eat until I was full and then I couldn't stop eating. That's another indication that you have a problem. You can't just eat
Yeah,
a couple cookies. You have to eat the whole box or whatever. There are certain foods I
yeah,
call red
right.
light foods. I have to stay completely away from them.
Hmm. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. An experience that you talked about in your book that I also want to touch on quickly
Thank you.
is the fact that you were in Chicago. You kept your things inside the car and you forgot to remove it from the car and it was gone. And you're
Yeah.
advising people do not leave your valuables in the car. And the mixing of drug and sex also started from there. And those experiences were on one side. So let's try to like see the positive in Chicago. What
Mm.
positive thing do you remember about Chicago, living in
Yeah,
Chicago?
there are some positives. Have you been there before,
Yes, I've
Tony?
been there.
Yeah.
Downtown Chicago. Yeah.
I loved the lake, Lake Michigan. I would go
Mm-hmm.
there. I would hang out on that beach in the summer like I was in Miami. I just
Hmm.
loved to get in the water and throw throw the football or the frisbee around with people and soak in the sun. I love the summer. I didn't like
Mm-hmm.
the winters, but there it's a lot of culture. It's a very
Yep.
rich cultural city, and I love Little India on Devon
Hmm.
Street. I
Yeah.
was fortunate enough to work in India for 4.5 months prior,
Mm-hmm.
just prior to me moving to Chicago, and it was
Mm-hmm.
such a comfort to walk down Devon Street and have Indian restaurants and video places and grocery stores, and it was just like I was back there. It was really cool.
Wow. 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 Thank you for sharing that. So there's a couple of things that kept repeating itself in the book. I just want to mention a couple of them. Addiction is a disease. Addict are liars. Drug of choice. Addiction is a liar. Addiction prayers. If you had the opportunity to pick an alternative title for your book from these words that I mentioned, which one of them would you pick? I'll repeat them again. Addiction is a disease. Addicts are liars. Drug of choice. Addiction is a liar. Addiction prayers. Which one of them would you pick?
Wow, those are all good. But
Right?
my book had a different title before The Pit of Despair. It was
Mm-hmm.
called The Insanity of Addiction.
Okay.
But I worked with my publisher, and they wanted me to write like 9 or 10 different alternative titles. And I had a
Mhm,
meeting with the COO and the rest of the team, and he
mhm,
said, "Oh, we really love one of the titles. It really is descriptive, and that is The Pit of Despair." And then the subtitle, How God Prayer and the 12 Steps Saved My Life from Addiction. And I said,
mhm.
"Who wrote that title?" And they said, "You did." I don't even remember it. It was God writing through me. I think that's
Mhm.
what I believe.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was like,
yeah, yeah.
"Where'd you come up with that?" And they're like, "You did."
Hmm. Yeah. So you didn't expect it was gonna be that, right? Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So any one of these you probably think could
um,
replace that?
I would say addiction is a disease because
Addiction is a disease.
most people don't believe that, and I want people to know that. I want people to know that they're not alone, and
Yeah.
that my
Hmm.
story can really. I want to be an inspiration to people, make them or have them realize they're not alone, and that if God could pull me out of the pit of despair, that He can do the same for them. Period. End of story.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. This should be my last question for today. There's something that you did in your book that is very not conventional. You actually put your contact information there, your phone number for people to reach out to you to help and to pray with them in case they want to be prayed with. Why did you decide to do that? And what do
Well,
you hope to achieve by doing that?
yeah, yeah. It's kind of a silly story, but Bob Goff
Hmm.
is an author that I read his book called Distracted. He's a Christian
Yeah,
author, and he put his phone
yeah,
number in the back of his book. So I
yeah.
called that number. I was curious, and I didn't reach him a few times, but then he
Mhm.
answered, and I was like, "Whoa!" And he addressed me with, it was like I was starstruck, and he's like, "It's okay, I'm here." And I wanted the same thing for myself. So I got
Mhm,
a different phone, and then it became an expense that I didn't want to pay. So that phone,
mhm, mhm.
I'm sorry to say that phone number is not active, but anyone
Okay.
can reach me at lisajobar at
Mhm.
gmail.com.